The views or opinions expressed on Ann Arbor Inclusive do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the City of Ann Arbor and the Commission on Disability Issues. For more information about the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues, please visit a2gov.org/disability resources.
Hello everyone and welcome to Ann Arbor Inclusive. I'm Zach Damon. We have a wonderful show for you today as Jason DeCamillis, teacher consultant for students with visual impairments at the WISD, joins us in studio. My goodness, Jason, what a mouthful.
Yeah, I know. I have to say it all the time.
yeah, but well deserved, so I hope I did all right.
It was perfect.
Thank you. So let's get the ball rolling, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you serve as a teacher consultant for students with visual impairments at the WISD, but for those that don't necessarily know what that title is, what does the job involve?
Yeah, so I work with quite a diverse caseload of students in the public schools. I have 26 students right now across about 16 different schools. And so I travel from school to school and teach them different skills such as Braille, for instance, for totally blind students, or just using technology for students who have low vision. It's a lot of working with adults and things like that as well, which I didn't expect as much when I was learning to be a teacher.
Sure.
A lot of my day is spent training staff and talking to staff at different schools and things on how to best accommodate students and things like that. So.
Yeah, and how would you say, in your mind, those staff sort of take to the new technology and to the new developments sort of within the visual impairment sector? Are they very open to it, or can it be challenging for them?
Oh, it's a little bit of both. I mean, it depends on the school and the environment. Everyone is different. So that's what's kind of cool about my job and the day that I have is that I'll go from one school where everybody really just takes to it immediately,
Sure.
and it's like, no problem, it's a snap, and then I'll go to the next school where everyone needs a lot of training and a lot more attention in order to get the things working well. So everybody's usually really willing to use the technology. It's
Sure.
just a matter of, you know, getting that training process going.
Well, yeah, and I think it's amazing, too, that not only are you a person that has been a student and have experienced that, you know, firsthand, going through academia and having to deal with those challenges of being, you know, visually impaired, but then also being on the forefront of educating those educators to make sure that the future students get the proper things that they need, and I think that's amazing. So I'm interested, too, what first got you interested in working with students with visual impairments?
Well, I'm visually impaired. I'm legally blind due to a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which affects the retina, sort of a degenerative condition.
Sure.
Where my peripheral vision is affected, night vision, some of my central acuity is affected a little bit. But it's degenerative, so over the course of my life, it's sort of, you know, my vision has decreased.
Okay.
And so when I was going to school originally, you know, as a grade schooler or something like that, you know, I didn't notice it as much. It was sort of just natural to me, you know,
Right.
how my vision was.
Right.
As I got older, it got a little bit more difficult. And then when I got out into the real world, you know, I just decided eventually, I think I'd like to go back to school for, you know, teaching kids and really helping sort of build support networks around kids
Sure.
who really need that support.
Right.
Maybe even more than I did. Yeah, when I was going to school. So.
Yeah, well, I think it says a lot about you because, I mean, I'm sure you see the faces of a lot of those kids and, you know, you can understand and you know, have that credibility in saying, you know what, I know how you feel. I went through those exact same challenges.
Absolutely.
And have you noticed, I guess, you know, a boost in confidence in working with those students and the fact that, you know, you yourself have gone through it and you're able to help them sort of overcome those obstacles?
Yes, yeah. I mean, just yesterday I had a conversation with a student where they're very unwilling to sort of talk about their visual impairment, and I was too. So I got to really talk about that where, you know, the more you talk about it, the more it sort of normalizes disability for people and reduces the stigma and helps everyone understand what you need.
Sure.
And I think that is one of the biggest things is kids advocating for themselves for me. And I'm able to, yeah, like you said, I'm really able to relate to them in a way that I think is unique. I don't think there's a lot of people who directly relate to them like that.
Right.
Not that other people can't do the same work,
Sure.
but it does help.
Yeah. Well, and again, you talked about how you were diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, you know, early on, but can you talk really quick just about some of the challenges you did face as a young student?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was probably, it's like one of those big milestones is being able to drive. And
Sure.
so I never learned to drive a car. I sort of learned to drive a car, but I never was able to get my license or anything. So that was probably the biggest one, and that sort of hits you right in the middle of high school when you're, everything's sort of a mess in, in a high schooler's life in a certain way. So that one was kind of difficult, but I found ways around it, and that's when I really started to be able to advocate for myself. Figuring out schedules where I need to be, how am I going to get there, working, going to school, and things like that. So that was probably the biggest way that it affected me.
Yeah. Wow. And I think it's really, really awesome and interesting that you were able to sort of just continue to move forward. I mean, it sounds like, too, you had a great support system, growing up. So how important to you as a person and as a man now with a disability, how important is it to early on have a good support system?
Oh, it's everything. I mean, if you don't have that when you're young, and a lot of kids that I teach or a lot of kids that we all see in schools, they don't necessarily have that support system at home or in their personal lives. So providing it, where we can is really important. So for me, it was everything. Having a family who was supportive, who would sort of teach me how to do things, help me when I sort of got stuck and figure out what the best, problem solving, or, the best solution is to a problem. So
Sure. Wonderful. And really quick, too, we talked a little bit before the show. Now, you got your graduate degree from the University of Michigan. And can you talk a little bit about, some of the academic courses that they do at U of M and sort of how they're sort of moving forward and pushing that forward?
Yeah, so my degree was in educational leadership and policy at the University of Michigan. And they do a few different versions of that. One track is sort of the administrative track, and the other one is just kind of being a sort of more of a teacher leader, a leader within your profession.
Sure.
And that's the kind of route that I went. Wasn't the certification for being an administrator, but that sort of like trying to help find ways to influence and lead within sort of your role, whatever that's going to be. And so with that, I got to take a lot of great elective courses and cognate courses around the university. And one of the most amazing ones for me was the disability studies course that they have.
Sure.
That was like just so eye-opening. I got to meet some really great people from the disability studies community who I got to read some great stuff and just meet some awesome people from around campus who are really like world known for, known around the world for their disability studies research and work. So it was really great.
No, that's awesome. And I'm excited to hear that you had, again, a great opportunity there and really cherished your time.
Yeah.
It's always nice to hear. So, and aside from, serving as a teacher consultant for students with visual impairments with the WISD, you are also a filmmaker.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is amazing. And so would you mind talking a little bit about your documentary, which is Flying Blind?
Yeah. About 2 years ago, it's actually about 2 years ago this month, I decided to try to do something I never thought I'd be able to do, which was learn how to fly a plane. And so because of my visual impairment, I just assumed, and this is a big thing for me too, is all the assumptions that people have about each other or yourself or anything.
Yeah.
I just assumed that I would never be able to do that.
Right.
And so I just decided one day just to call up a local flying club called the Michigan Flyers right out here at Ann Arbor Municipal Airport.
Yep.
We just heard some planes going over a little bit ago, and
That's
that
right.
might have been some of them. They seemed willing, they wanted to have a few discussions and find out more about me and what I was doing.
Yeah.
But they agreed to have me go up, and I went up with a great instructor. His name is Alex Arts, and he's actually a ear surgeon at Mott Children's Hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he's a really interesting and awesome guy. And he took me up, and we were flying, and he was saying, if this is something you really want to do, I don't have a problem teaching you to do this. He'd have to be there with me. I can't do it all on my own like a lot of people might.
Yeah.
But that's how I got started. It was just an initial, like an introductory flight that they offer for anyone.
Yeah.
And it was because he decided to say, sort of invite me into it and say, just so you know, you can do this. I just decided to kind of keep going with it.
Yeah.
And so from there, I wanted to share the story, and that was how it initially started. So I bought some extra gear. I had some camera stuff, but I bought some GoPros and extra things that I
Sure.
could use to get good footage. And
Yeah.
I just started doing it right after I finished my grad program in July of that year. I went right out and just started. Yeah.
That's awesome. In your mind, I mean, what does it feel like to have a visual impairment, but to be up in the air, sitting in the cockpit, hands on the yoke, and just sort of feeling every angle, feeling every vibration, and going through the sky?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it's, you know, I've flown in big planes just throughout my life, going to different trips to places and things like that.
Sure.
But it was always my dream to like actually pilot a small plane. And so it's just a little Cessna plane, and really it's no bigger than, you know, where you're sitting. You're crammed right next to the person next to you, and it's a pretty intimate sort of small space.
Sure.
And it's just an amazing feeling, yeah, to be able to do that and know that I have the skills and the knowledge, but then also like actually do it. With the occasional, you know, me asking for help, or like, do you see this thing over here, or can you watch for traffic for me?
Right.
Knowing I have that support from the instructor, but being able to do a lot of those things on my own that I never thought I'd do. I think anything that anyone does that they never thought they'd be able to do is a pretty awesome experience, yeah.
Oh, no, definitely. And I mean, it has to definitely, you know, broaden your mind too, in terms of, you know, what a person is capable of doing.
Sure.
And how flying a plane can be adapted in certain ways.
That's right, yeah, and that's what I do in my job every day is I say, well, school is designed this way, and these kids are, you know, have these set of needs, and I need to somehow adapt that experience for these kids.
Sure.
And there's lots of ways to do that, and
Right.
it's different from every environment, but, you know, that going into it with that mindset, I think, really helped me sort of be able to do this.
Sure. And just on the film too, what do you hope viewers take away from this?
You know, I think a lot of people might look at it and see it's sort of like, I don't know if you've heard of the supercrypt narrative, where what that is saying is like, you know, you can achieve your dreams in, you know, in spite of all these things that have happened to you, right?
Yeah.
And there's you know, there's sort of a part of it is that, but I have sort of, I think that's sort of a dangerous path to take.
Sure.
Because that sort of is saying like, so this other person with a visual impairment should be able to fly a plane.
Right.
It's like, well, what if they don't want to? Or what if they, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
there's lots of, it's more about what I want to do, doing something that I want to do,
Yeah.
and knowing who I can ask for the help. And so advocate for myself. And it's about working across our abilities and being able to say, you have this set of unique traits or abilities, I have this set of traits and abilities. Let's work together to try to do this one thing.
Right.
That's what it's all about to me.
Well, that's awesome. And so far, hopefully the project's been going well and it's been enjoyable.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate again sort of entering it into film festivals and you know, hopefully being an award-winning filmmaker and then, I mean, going on to do some other films? I mean, is that sort of the goal with that?
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, you know, it started out really small, and we'll see how big it gets. It's I've had starts and stops within the process just because of work and schedules and stuff, weather even with the planes.
Yeah, yeah.
But I hope to have everything finished by this fall.
Cool.
And then, like you said, yeah, entering it into some festivals and trying to get it out, just get it out there to schools and kids and families. That's what's important to me about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite filmmaker?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I think there are a lot of there's so many different genres and everything.
Yes.
But I honestly love like Quentin Tarantino.
There we go. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's there's a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, well, Tarantino's a great filmmaker.
Absolutely.
And definitely very distinct style,
Yep.
and always keeps you visually locked in.
Oh yeah,
So,
the whole thing. Yeah, from start to finish.
yeah, that's awesome. And you know, it's interesting too because you talked a little bit about traveling too.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting because you have an article online, and it's with Abroad with Disabilities.
Yeah.
And that's a site that sort of documents people with disabilities traveling around the world and their experience. And I thought it was very interesting. And you've done a lot of traveling. So really quick, can you touch on a favorite place that you've been recently?
Yeah, in that article I talked about my fiance was actually while I was doing my grad program for a year, she was in South Korea teaching English for a year. And
Yeah.
so I traveled there to see her, and that was one of the more unique places I think I've been. Culturally for me, like sort of the difference from going to Europe or something like that. That was probably one of the more amazing places I've been. I was there for about 2.5 weeks, so I got to really experience it.
Sure.
Other than that, I've been to Europe, and Italy has been great. But even just like one of my favorite things to do is go backpacking. And so
Oh, yeah? Nice.
my fiance and I actually do trips. We did a couple last summer where we went in Michigan here, we went to like Pictured Rocks
Oh,
and
yeah, of course.
North Manitou Island and things like that.
Yep.
And those are like multi-day longer backpacking trips. That's like one of the most fun things that I do. And
Sure.
it's not traveling abroad necessarily, but it's something that we'd like to do a lot together. So.
Well, yeah, and I think being outdoors is so meditative, you know?
Totally.
Being able to experience it and hear the sounds around you and the smells and, you know, just getting a chance to connect
Yep.
with the surroundings is great. So I think that's a lot of fun, and I hope that, you know, others can check out Abroad with Disabilities
Yeah.
and you know, be able to share their stories.
They're
as
a great
well.
organization, yeah.
Wonderful. That's amazing. And so, again, and you touched on it a little bit, but I'd also like you to share just one great memory of working with the WISD in terms of, you know, talking with faculty, talking with students, when you really had a moment when you knew that what you were doing really made a difference. Can you share one memory?
Yeah, sure. I think most recently at a school, it was probably a couple of months ago, I was working on this technology with a student who also has some short-term memory issues.
Okay.
And so combining like visual impairment with short-term memory issues is actually, you know, a pretty difficult thing to accommodate for, because a lot of people who don't have use of their vision will have to remember a lot of things. And so the issues came up around technology and sort of remembering different workflows and really complex things, and we just came up to this really simple idea of like making these sort of checklists, and all of a sudden everything started to sort of click and fall into place for that student, and they had these sort of like one big like aha moment where they were just like, oh, it's just that I do this, 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 and this, and in order, and
Right.
and then I'm at the end goal, and I was like, yes, we're there, you know, like it was so, but that little type of thing for me, sort of problem solving and really working with a student and asking them like, do you think a checklist would work? Do you think, you know, what is it that you think that you need? Having them tell me, and then we integrate it and we sort of refine it down to like a finalized thing where it really worked for the student.
Right.
That for me was like, that was awesome.
Right. So aside from being a teacher consultant for students with visual impairments at the WISD, the really neat thing about you, Jason, is you're also a filmmaker.
Right, yeah.
And so we're going to see a clip here from your film, Flying Blind. Would you mind talking about it?
Sure, absolutely. So what I did is about 2 years ago, I decided to try to do something that I never thought I'd be able to do because of my visual impairment,
Sure.
which is learn to fly a plane. And so what I did is I contacted a local flying club called the called Michigan Flyers.
Sure.
And they decided, they agreed that they would take me up for an introductory flight lesson. And my instructor here on the screen, actually next to me there, Alex Arts, was the guy who I originally went up with. And this is a few lessons in, but for that initial lesson, he was, you know, so supportive and encouraged me to actually pursue flying.
Nice.
You know, which is something I never thought I'd hear before. But he said as long as he's sitting there in the seat and he's really in command of the plane, he's comfortable taking me up and learning how to fly.
Sure.
And so this is just one of our lessons where I was actually performing a takeoff here. We started off kind of communicating with the tower and everything, and then now we're taking off of runway 6 here at Ann Arbor Municipal Airport, which is actually just down the road.
Oh,
from
yeah,
where we're
yeah,
at.
not too far away.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just a great feeling, and you get up to speed, and all of a sudden you're lifting off, and you got to kind of control for the wind and make sure that you're,
Sure.
heading the right, keeping the right heading out of the runway and looking for traffic. And Alex helps me with all that stuff that I'm unable to do. So with my peripheral vision, it's really difficult for me to search for traffic around this, in the sky and
Right.
to see those little spots and things. So.
Right.
I'm at the controls, I'm in complete control of the plane, and then he kind of helps me with all those extra things that are difficult for me to do personally.
Sure. And what kind of plane were you in?
It's a Cessna 152. It's just a really small plane, and you can see it's a pretty cramped little cockpit. You're right next to each other. It's a pretty intimate little space.
Yeah.
And so you get to know each other really well, and it's just an amazing experience to be sort of that close, but then you're also just doing this really amazing thing way up in the air. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's really neat. I mean, as a person with a visual impairment, what does it physically feel like to be in the cockpit and having your hands on the yoke and feeling all those vibrations and every little turn and feeling the elevation.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like complete freedom. It really is. I mean when you're up there and like you said, it's very loud and it's very you have the headsets on, but it's this really kind of meditative experience. I think we talked about that a little bit. It's a lot of people ask, are you nervous or do you get scared when you're up in the air? And to me, it's like I've never been more calm. It's a really bizarre thing for me. I didn't expect that.
Sure.
It's a very calming and centering, and it's really an enjoyable experience. Yeah.
No, that's really neat. I mean, what originally got you saying, hey, I'd like to fly a plane?
I don't know. I was like, I can remember from when I was like, 7 years old or something, just wanting to be able to do that. And there's no explanation for it. Nobody in my family's a pilot or anything.
Okay.
I just wanted to do it, and I just
awesome.
had thought about it in the back of my mind ever since then.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. And then, so once you go through a certain amount of training, will you continue to fly in the future?
I think so, yeah, just once in a while with an instructor who would let me, go up with them.
Sure.
I got to the point where I did we call it a supported solo flight. And so
Okay.
typically a big achievement is that you get to fly the plane on your own completely without your instructor with you. Since I can't do that, what we did is we switched instructors, had another one come into the plane with me, and his job was to just sit there and keep us safe.
Okay.
And so it was really like I was totally in control. He didn't really say much or anything.
Okay.
He didn't have to intervene or anything, and so I kind of got to do that, like takeoff and landing 3 times out at the airport here.
Sure.
With him there just to make sure we're all safe, and that was a great experience. Yeah. So moving on from there, I think I would really like to keep flying. Yeah.
That is so amazing. I mean, I see you as a guy that just embraces challenge and finds a solution and gets it done. And I really admire that about you.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I think it's a great quality to have.
Thank you.
Where do you think you get that from?
Geez, I don't know. My family is really, that's definitely, how I was raised. It's
Sure.
like there's a problem, any problem has a solution one way or another. Whether everybody's happy with that solution, I don't know always, but it is certainly about that, yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, I think, personally, myself being a person with a disability as well, I think a bulk of what we go through as people with disabilities is adaptation. And instead of looking at something as a problem, we say, okay, let's find a solution.
Yeah, and educating people, I think, is important to me, people around me. And I had a conversation with a student the other day that was, unfortunately, you are the expert in your school on visual impairment, because everybody's going to ask you, and you're
Sure.
going to not have you have to explain. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you about my experience. And
Right.
That's really important, I think.
No, definitely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. How much education is important, and understanding that people have the intellectual tools to be able to move forward
Right.
and have that education. And you and I talked a little bit about before the show too that you are a big supporter of inclusion and making sure that term itself is broadened in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, that's true. The word inclusion is sort of tricky for me because a lot of people talk about inclusion, and what they're really saying is like we have this thing, we've designed, as a society, we've designed schools, for instance, as an institution.
Sure.
And inclusion to me, unfortunately, a lot of people mean we're going to like do things to invite these other people into this system.
Right.
And it's really like, well, why don't we just design the system for everybody? And that's slowly what we're trying to accomplish. And it's difficult. It's difficult work. It's difficult to figure out where to start with that. I think it is changing sort of what does inclusion mean.
Right. I mean, in the academic setting, do you see things moving forward? Do you see an optimistic, light at the end of the tunnel, if you will?
I do, yeah. I think sort of the field of disability studies it's just exploded in the last 20 years or so.
Sure.
And there's so many different disability studies scholars out there who are doing really important work and research and documenting their own experiences and doing all sorts of things that are helping to further those ideas and
Right.
sort of tear apart like what is disability and where does ability and disability start and end, and
Yep.
Is it a society that's disabled? Is it a person? There's a lot to it, and I think there's just so much great literature out there now about that. But I think that's sort of a good positive direction that's sort of taken course in the last few years.
Sure. That's amazing. I mean, so going back to the film, what is your end goal for the film? What do you hope viewers and people take away?
I think it's about that. I think it's not saying like hey, look, I'm blind and I can fly a plane too.
Yeah.
It's about more saying like, this is something I've always wanted to do regardless of anything else, and I found someone who would, and a support system and a group and a person who would support me in achieving that goal, no matter what it takes. And so sometimes it's really easy. I mean, it's actually, hasn't been that difficult for my instructor to help me with, and I thought it might have been a big challenge. Turns out that if we just sort of communicate, talk, we get to know each other, we understand what my limitations are and where his sort of pick up from there.
Sure.
It all works out really well, and I think that sort of casual, sort of seamless communication like that is what's so helpful.
And what's really I think amazing to me when sitting here with you and talking is just the positive outlook that you have and the passion that you have of sharing your experiences and your knowledge. And I think that's really priceless, because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah, right.
Being able to share what you've been through, but also being able to share the current challenges that you're putting forth on yourself to move forward, I think is just amazing. And one of the things I wanted to ask you too, for those parents that are watching, that have children, whether it's with a visual impairment or whether it's something else, or whether it's an adult or a child with a visual impairment and they happen to come across this program, what would you say to them? What advice would you give to them?
I think it's about learning to advocate for yourself and giving, especially giving kids the opportunities to advocate for themselves in school and at home, anywhere. That's one of the biggest sort of roadblocks I see in people's lives, is as they sort of approach college or a point where they're expected to be more independent.
Sure.
People have done so much for them their whole life that they've not really given them a full experience of what it means to really do things for yourself.
Right.
And everybody has the best intentions. People just want to help everyone get to the end goal.
Yeah.
But the end result is that a person, and this happens to everybody, it isn't just kids with disabilities either.
Sure.
They don't know what to do. They get sort of dropped off and they're like, okay, now live your life.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to talk to kids, give them that opportunity to advocate for themselves at every opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. And Jason, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And folks, that's all the time we have for today. But again, I'd like to thank Jason for joining us on the show and hope that you enjoyed the program. Please be sure to tune into Ann Arbor Inclusive next month. And as always, stay awesome, Ann Arbor.